Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more amazing stories. The sound of clinking glasses and polite laughter filled the grand ballroom of the Sterling Hotel. Beneath the shimmering chandeliers, New York's wealthiest mingled, discussing business, deals, and luxury vacations as waiters moved between them with trays of champagne. Ethan Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Industries, stood near the center of the room, engaged in a conversation with a group of investors. Tall, composed, and always in control, he exuded an aura of authority that demanded respect. But tonight, despite his usual charm, his mind felt elsewhere, trapped in a strange, nagging feeling he couldn't quite place. Then it happened. A soft yet determined voice cut through the chatter. "Hi, sir. I was born in an orphanage, so why do I have your last name?" The words hit Ethan like a bolt of lightning. His breath caught in his throat as he turned toward the voice. A young woman stood there. Her clothes were simple, a little worn, but her posture was straight, and her dark eyes held an intensity that made it impossible to look away. She had long, wavy brown hair that framed a face strikingly familiar, though Ethan couldn't understand why. For a moment, the entire room seemed to pause, curious eyes darting toward them. Whispers started. Ethan blinked. "Excuse me," the girl swallowed, gripping the strap of her small bag tightly. "My name is Lily Carter, but I don't have a family. I grew up in St. Mary's Orphanage. I don't know how I got your last name." Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to stand firm. Ethan's sharp mind, used to handling billion-dollar deals and ruthless negotiations, suddenly felt blank. Carter. The name wasn't uncommon, but something about the girl, something about her eyes. He had seen those eyes before. A low murmur swept through the crowd. Some guests exchanged glances, while others simply enjoyed the unexpected drama. Ethan set his glass down, straightening his posture. "I think you might be mistaken, Miss Carter." He said her last name carefully, feeling its weight on his tongue. "I don't know how you got that name, but it's not connected to me." Lily's fingers curled into fists at her sides. "I checked my birth certificate. It says my last name is Carter. I asked the orphanage, but they said they didn't know who left me there. I don't want anything from you. I just want the truth." Ethan studied her closely. The fire in her eyes, the determination in her stance. It was unnerving. There was something familiar, something that unsettled him in a way no business rival ever had. He was about to respond when another voice entered the conversation. "Sir?" Ethan's assistant, Daniel, stepped in, a cautious look on his face. "Perhaps we should take this somewhere private." Ethan glanced around. Too many eyes, too many questions. He nodded sharply. "Follow me," Lily exhaled, her heart pounding as she followed Ethan out of the ballroom. Away from the prying gazers, she had spent years gathering the courage for this moment. And now, standing beside one of the most powerful men in the country, she felt both terrified and hopeful. Ethan led her into a quiet lounge, the door clicking shut behind them. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "All right, tell me everything you know." Lily's voice was steady. "I don't know who my parents are. I was abandoned as a baby at St. Mary's. The only thing I have from my past is my last name, Carter." Ethan crossed his arms. "That doesn't prove anything." She reached into her bag and pulled out an old faded envelope. "This was left with me at the orphanage. It's the only clue I have." Ethan hesitated before taking it from her hands. The paper was worn, the edges frayed with time. Slowly he unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words, and as he read, his grip on the paper tightened. "Ethan, if you ever see this, Please don't let her suffer for my mistakes. Sst. The room fell into silence. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his chest. Only one person in his life signed their name with just an S. Sophia. A ghost from his past, a name he hadn't spoken in years. His eyes snapped back to Lily, his mind racing. Who was this girl? And why did the past he buried so long ago suddenly feel so close? Lily watched him, desperation creeping into her voice. You know something, don't you? Ethan opened his mouth, but for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to say. Because if this letter was real, then everything he believed about his past was a lie. Ethan's fingers tightened around the letter as his mind raced through memories he had long buried. The name, Sophia, echoed in his head like a ghost whispering from the past. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. He had searched for answers years ago and had come up empty. And now, standing in front of him, this girl, Lily Carter, was tearing open a wound he thought had healed. Lily stepped closer, her voice pleading but firm. You know something, don't you? Please, I've spent my whole life wondering why I was left behind. If you know anything at all, I need to hear it. Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze. He saw it now, the sharp determination in her eyes, the slight tilt of her chin when she challenged him. It was so familiar, so much like, "Ha!" His chest felt tight, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure what move to make next. He exhaled slowly, trying to regain control. Where did you get this letter? I told you. It was left with me at the orphanage. The nuns kept it safe. I only got it when I turned 18. Ethan's jaw clenched. The last time he had seen Sophia, she was leaving, walking away from him, her eyes full of unshed tears. They had been young, reckless, caught between love and the expectations of their worlds. He had waited for her to come back. She never did. A year later, he heard she had vanished without a trace. His voice was low when he spoke again. What do you want from me? Lily hesitated. The truth. Ethan ran a hand down his face. The truth. It sounded so simple. Yet he wasn't sure he even had the answers she was looking for. But something deep in his gut told him that if this girl had been given his last name, if this letter was real, then his past had just caught up to him in the most unexpected way. A knock at the door interrupted the tension. Daniel, Ethan's assistant, poked his head in cautiously. Sir, your guests are wondering if everything is all right. Ethan barely acknowledged him. His mind was elsewhere, locked on the weight of the letter in his hand and the young woman standing in front of him. He turned back to Lily. We can't talk here. Come with me. Lily hesitated. Where? To my office. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. Then finally, she gave a small nod. The ride to Carter Industries was silent. Lily sat in the back of the sleek black car, her fingers twisting, together in her lap. She had imagined this moment for so long, but she had never expected it to unfold like this. Ethan sat beside her, unreadable, his gaze locked on the city lights flashing past the window. He had built his empire from the ground up, turned Carter Industries into a giant that controlled half the market. And yet, at this moment, he felt like the ground beneath him was slipping away. As they entered the towering Carter Industries building, the security guards immediately stepped aside. They rode the private elevator to the top floor. The tension thick between them. Ethan led her into his office, a large glass-walled space that overlooked the city skyline. He moved to his desk, unlocking a drawer and pulling out an old file. Lily watched as he flipped through documents, his movements suddenly stiff. controlled. Finally, he pulled out a faded photograph. He hesitated before sliding it across the desk to her. Lily picked it up carefully. It was old, slightly worn, but as she studied the image, her breath caught. It was a woman, young, beautiful, with long wavy hair that looked exactly like hers. Lily's hands trembled. "Who is she?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "Sophia." Lily's heart pounded. She had never seen this woman before. Yet somehow, she felt an unexplainable connection. "Was she someone important to you?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "She was the only woman I ever loved." Lily's chest tightened. Then, why did she leave? Why did she abandon me? Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, his cold exterior cracked. "I don't know." Lily frowned. "But you just said." "I don't know." "Because I never knew about you." The words hung heavy in the air. Lily stared at him, her mind reeling. "You're saying you didn't know she had a child?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "If I had known, if I had even suspected, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you." Lily swallowed hard, trying to process his words. Could he be telling the truth? Had her whole life been built on a lie? Ethan leaned forward, his eyes locked onto hers. "If you are Sophia's daughter, if you are my daughter, then someone made sure I never knew about you." A chill ran down Lily's spine. "But why? Who would do that?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's what we're going to find out." For the first time in her life, Lily felt like she was standing at the edge of something huge. The truth she had spent years searching for wasn't just hidden, it had been buried. And now, as she looked at the man who might be her father, she realized that uncovering the past might change both of their lives forever. But neither of them knew that the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous things would become, because someone out there had worked hard to keep these secrets buried, and they weren't about to let them come to light. Lily's heart pounded as she stared at Ethan. His words still echoed in her mind. "Someone made sure I never knew about you." It changed everything. If he was telling the truth, then her entire life had been manipulated by someone she had never even met. But why? Who would do that? And what were they trying to hide? Ethan stood up, his mind already racing through possibilities. He had built an empire on control, on knowing every move before his opponents made it. Yet somehow, someone had played him, had taken away his own child without him ever realizing. And now, after all these years, the truth was creeping out from the shadows. Lily clutched the letter in her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do we find out what really happened?" Ethan's gaze hardened. "We start with the last person who saw your mother." The next day, they tracked down an old name, Margaret Lane, a former caretaker at the orphanage where Lily had been, left as a baby. She was frail now, her hands trembling as she clutched a teacup, but her eyes still held sharpness as she looked between Ethan and Lily. "You finally came," Margaret said softly, surprising them both. Lily's breath caught. "You knew about me." Margaret nodded. "Your mother trusted me with her secret. She told me that if anything ever happened to her, one day you'd come looking for answers." Ethan leaned forward. "What happened to Sophia?" Margaret hesitated, then sighed. "She was scared. She told me she had uncovered something dangerous. She was planning to tell you, Ethan, but before she could, she disappeared." Lily's hands clenched. "Disappeared? Or was she taken?" Margaret met Ethan's gaze, and for the first time, he saw something in her expression. Fear. "I don't know, but I do know that she didn't leave by choice." A cold realization settled over Ethan. This wasn't just about a long-lost daughter. It was about a cover-up. one that someone had gone to extreme lengths to keep buried. Digging through old company records, Ethan found something shocking. Just weeks before Sophia vanished, she had accessed private financial files belonging to Carter Industries, records of illegal transactions, money being funneled into secret accounts, and the name attached to those transactions: Victor Carter. Ethan's hands curled into fists. His father, the man who had once built this company from nothing, the man Ethan had idolized. Lily read over his shoulder, her voice shaking. "Your father, he was involved in something illegal." Ethan exhaled sharply. And Sophia must have found out. It all made sense now. Sophia hadn't run away from Ethan. She had been running from his father. She had been trying to protect herself and their child. But the deeper they dug, the darker the truth became. They found an old witness statement from a private investigator, a man who had been hired to track Sophia just before she disappeared. His report mentioned one last phone call she made before vanishing. She was afraid for her life. She said someone was following her. She said she had proof of something, but she didn't know who to trust. Lily's stomach twisted. "She was trying to warn you," she whispered. Ethan felt something crack inside him, and I never even knew. Determined to uncover the last, missing pieces, Ethan confronted the one person who still held answers: his father's former business partner. The man had aged, but his guilt was fresh. As he finally confessed, Victor Carter had learned about Sophia's investigation. He had seen her as a threat, and before she could expose the truth, he had her taken away. The word sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Did he? His throat tightened, unable to finish the question. The man shook his head. No, he didn't kill her, but he made sure she could never come back. Lily's breath hitched. So she could still be out there. The man hesitated. After what happened, I don't know. It wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was the answer they had. Standing outside the old office, Ethan turned to Lily. "If she's alive, I'll find her," he promised. "But if she's gone, I'll make sure the world knows what happened to her." Lily blinked back tears. She deserved better. Ethan nodded. "And so do you." Weeks later, the truth about Victor Carter's crimes made headlines. The company Ethan had spent years building took a hit, but he didn't care. He refused to build his success on lies. He stepped down from parts of the business, redirecting his focus toward finding out what really happened to Sophia. And Lily, she had spent her whole life searching for where she belonged. Now, standing beside the man who should have been there from the start, she finally had an answer. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about truth, about the choices they made moving forward. As she looked at Ethan, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore.